me, Oshalake, and I'm the Deputy Managing Director at the Global Shea Alliance. In my role as Deputy Managing Director, I interface a lot with our international brands, our food brands, as well as our personal care brands, and as well as, other small, medium organization. I do a lot of work on policy advocacy as well, and also work with our communications team. Ultimately, the mission of the Global Shea Alliance is to promote the sustainable development of the industry. And we believe that, the food sector as a main utilization of the shea product, shea ingredients and derivatives have a significant role to play. So I am glad to be here today to really just talk about Shea, where it comes from, give a bit of an overview as well on, some of the benefits of Shea, how we're seeing it grow in the food space. In addition to that, talk a bit more about the nutrition profile of Shea, which makes it a great ingredient, actually, a versatile ingredient for the food industry, the confectionery industry, as well as bakery, and also just touch a bit on the sustainability importance of the industry, not just from a women's economic empowerment perspective, but from a climate resilience perspective, and the importance that the Shea parklands play in addressing some of our climate challenges. So, well, thank you again for having me, and I will dive into our presentation. So really just to kick off the discussion, for the sake of people that don't know a lot about Shea, it is a tree that's indigenous to the African space, the African region. We see about 2 billion shea trees, which grow naturally on farmland from Senegal to South Sudan across about a 5,000 kilometer stretch. So you often see these trees growing in about 21 African countries, just a little bit below the Sahel belt. Shea is actually a very important tree beyond the fact that it is an important tree in that landscape, one of the most predominant trees in the landscape. It supports livelihoods of about 60 million African women and their communities. The importance can be seen in how much it contributes to their income. So we see that activities from Shea could generate as much as 12% of the income that these communities do rely on. It's also interesting from a perspective of gender, because Shea is about the only tree that is really gender focused. So a lot of the collection, the harvesting and the processing, the first mile level work is done by women, and a lot of them get their livelihoods, and those livelihoods are then invested into things like their children's education, health benefits. They're introduced into even securing better nutrition food for their families. So just to give a context there around what Shea is. And really the value chain over time, what we've seen is that at the first mile level, there's a lot of collection activities that's dominated by the women. The women will collect the Shea, process it, parboil it, dry it, aggregate it, and then sell it off. So we see the movement going from the collectors to some of the intermediary buyers, who then eventually sell off to commercial off-takers. And then we see that move from just that initial aggregation level activity to the processing activity. And that processing is including the transformation of Shea into different derivatives, particularly a cocoa butter equivalent for the food sector, and also different type of derivatives that's used in the personal care. Ultimately, we see about 85% of Shea going into the food sector, while just 15% into personal care. And this is why it's important for us to have this type of opportunities to dialogue within the food space. Just from the significant amount of the resource that's consumed by the food industry. We're starting to see a lot of proven benefits of Shea in food. Like I said before, it's a multiversatile ingredient, and it delivers numerous benefits, including enhancing sensory experiences from its use in food, We see it having a high nutrition profile, and it's also addressing a lot of the marketing trends that we're seeing. So, from a sensory perspective, just to dive a bit deeper into that, shea does enhance the melting behavior of ingredients or formulations. We see that it brings out a lot of the texture. It's a good flavor release, and it's really just very much compatible with cocoa butter. And you could see that in the graph below, really the way that the melting point of shea relative to other fats like palm and cocoa butter, it's stearing from cocoa butter. So you do see that from a sensory perspective, it's able to carry flavor and deliver flavor, and ultimately enhancing the experience of the consumer. From a nutritional perspective, we see that it has a very low saturated fat content, and I'm going to dive a bit deeper when I touch on the nutrition profile of shea and why this is important. I know we're all in a very health conscious environment, and people are looking to consume things that are better for their own personal upkeep. So talking about nutrition, yet again, very low saturated fat content, so it's which makes it very much of a functional ingredient in producing healthy foods. From a catering to marketing trends perspective, it's now being used as a palm, coconut, and cacao replacement in a lot of food applications, and for obvious reasons, particularly in the palm sector where you're dealing with a lot of deforestation challenges, and in the cocoa sector where you're having to address a lot of child labor issues. So shea does actually have a strong sustainability profile. Its impact on the environment, its positive impact on the environment as a carbon sequester, as well as the economic empowerment that it delivers for rural communities. It also is an organic option for a lot of people that are looking for that. It's naturally grown. There's no particular chemicals that's used in growing the trees or preserving the trees. So all of this just contributes to this benefit and this drive in the use of shea in the food sector. And you see in this in the coming slide how shea is now increasingly being used in different formulations over time. So just to really touch a bit more about the versatility of the ingredients from a food perspective, shea is used a lot in chocolate fillings, plant-based burgers, margarine spreads, vegan cheese, cookies, plant-based ice cream. So we're seeing a lot of its use across different categories of food. And personal care, we see shea being used as face cream, hand and body cream, and as well as soaps, amongst a few things. And just looking at the success story of it, really, and I touched on this a bit before, it is a cocoa butter equivalent in terms of use. It's used in a lot of chocolate, confectionery, coating, and fillings. We see it as a replacement to animal fat. So it's also used as alternate meat applications like plant-based burgers and vegan cheese, just like we saw in the slide before. It's a palm alternative, used in a lot of margarine spread formulations, as well as things like toppings and croissant formulations. And it is a good replacement for coconut as well due to its low sulfur levels. So talking about how shea is growing, particularly in food, we see a lot of growth in the chocolate and non-chocolate sector as well. So for shea, the growth that we're seeing in terms of the compound annual growth rate is about 9% in personal care since 2013 up until 2023. We're seeing a lot of chocolate-related growth as well at 6% CAGR, as well as in non-chocolate for about 7%. So that shows the growing interest of the food sector to actually use it, as well as the personal care sector. So by far, most of the shea applications that we're seeing are in personal care. So there's about 17,000 productions, new product introductions that we see on an annual basis. And for chocolate, that number is roughly about 2,000. And in food without chocolate, we're seeing about 400 to 500. And just the slide still really talks about that as well. It's just a continuation of the previous slide and showing that the growth rates has also stabilized after a rapid period of uptake between 2013 and 2018. And even since the COVID pandemic dip, where we all experienced the dip, and you could see that in that 2020 timeline, but we're seeing that the growth has continued to stabilize after that. So for CCF, you're seeing about a 2% compound annual growth rate. And in bakery, that's, settling into the 5% rate. In personal care, we're seeing that as well as 9%. So talking about just the versatility yet again of shea as a food ingredient. These are just examples of product introductions when you compare 2013 to 2023 and just seeing the difference in those numbers. So take, for example, the snack cereal and energy bars was seeing an average introduction of about 14 products in 2013, and that has grown significantly to 94 in 2023. And you could see even like cold cereals and meat substitute, where shea wasn't being used about 10 years ago, we're now seeing about 28 and 27 respectively of product introductions over time. So yet again, this speaks to the versatility of the ingredient, its multifunctionality, and how it really translates in a lot of product formulations. On this right-hand side, we're just really looking at like overall the percentages of use over time, with a lot of that coming in to snacks at 30%. And you also see some sugar confectionery at 25%, making up a significant amount of the use in food. Shea is really now a registered ingredient in much more and different applications, like alternate meats, cereals, snacks, cheese, savory spreads. So just wanted to dive a bit deeper into the unique fatty acid profile of shea. And this is important because on the slide before, I said that, one of the driving interests that beyond just the sensory and the fact that it's catering to market trends is also that it has a very strong nutritional profile. And I felt it was a bit necessary to touch on that and, create that awareness on what a healthy fat shea is. So from a nutritional composition, shea has very high stearic and oleic content, and this unique fat composition really contributes to its ability to deliver functionality very well in the food space, as well as contribute to positive health outcomes. So we see that unlike other fats, shea does have a lower palmatic composition, which is about 10%. And we know that like the palmatic saturated fats are really the more problematic fats that contribute to significant health issues like heart disease. So yet again, just to recap that, we see that shea has a lower percentage of palmatic content in its composition, roughly less than 10%. Palmatic saturated fatty acids are the more problematic fatty acids that contribute to heart, a lot of health risks, specifically heart diseases. The next slide dives a bit deeper, and that's just what I was just talking about. You see that stearic acid, it's more of a, so you see the stearic acid as a saturated fatty acid, but does not increase LDL cholesterol. And oleic is a monosaturated fatty acid, and that decreases like the LDL, which we call the bad cholesterol, and increases HDL, which are more of the good cholesterol there. The next slide just compares shea relative to other fats out there. So coconut palm kernel, beef tallow, and cocoa butter. And you could really see that shea has a higher stearic component there, which is a good type of fatty acid that doesn't increase LDL or what we call bad cholesterol. Just wanted to also touch on the fact that when you look at shea, it's almost 50-50 relative to the levels of stearic and palmitic, stearic and oleic rather, composition there. And that is where you see a lot of that functionality, but without the health risk. So you see that 50-50 composition between oleic and stearic acid. And this really are what drives the functionality of shea, but without the health risk. The composition is very different from other oils. When you look at cocoa butter, which, for example, has a higher amount of stearic acid, which is great, but it also has a higher amount of palmitic acid, palmitic fatty acid, and that's where you see that there. So yet again, those high palmitic saturated fats are those ones that could contribute to higher risk of coronary heart diseases. So jumping to the next slide, just to show other compositions of shea that makes it really a health benefit. So we see that shea contains polyphenol compounds that gives food. These are compounds that actually give food their red or purple color. And from research, you see that they reduce blood pressure, or they generally just have a positive effect on your blood pressure. And depending on how shea is refined, you would have some polyphenols in it. Sometimes it's relatively low, but you still do get that benefit from having polyphenols in it. Vitamin E is another great nutritional nutrient, really, that you could get from shea. So you see that, it's an important antioxidant. In addition to that, shea has it as a concentration that's similar to other vegetable oils like canola oil, and you have it 2 times of vitamin E levels in shea when you compare it to soybeans. Definitely the consumption of vitamin E is associated with lower heart diseases or, exposures to heart issues and increased heart benefits. Steroids are also another composition in shea that has positive health impact and benefits, and those also lower your LDL cholesterol. Just wanted to highlight that a bit. And bringing all of it together and why this is important, and why, utilizing healthy fats like shea is important in a lot of food formulation is really due to the growing concerns around cardiovascular diseases, not just in the US, but globally. And you see from data that the World Health Organization has put out that, cardiovascular diseases or illnesses are the number 1 cause of death in the world. In 2019 was an estimated 17.9 million people actually died from cardiovascular related diseases. So when you think about, what you're producing, the health benefits that relates to it, that's something that puts shea at the forefront of the discussion. As well. So I think when you think about the food industry and how they're formulating right now, it's a matter of functionality, which is a big deal. But and a lot of that comes from saturated fat. But when you see the composition of shea relative to others, then you get both the functionality benefit as well as the health benefits. This slide here is really just another slide that I wanted to highlight. This is data from WHO on cardiovascular events, and you could see the different factors on the left-hand side of the slide that are associated with the risk of cardiovascular issues, and some of this can be changed, and that's really the point I was trying to make with this slide. So, smoking habits can be reduced. You could do a lot with diet, you could do a lot with exercise, and that's modifiable at the individual level. However, as an industry, confectionery and when we're thinking about formulating, there's a lot that we could do if we reduce cholesterol levels. We could move from, depending on the age, you can move from a high level risk region into the red zone, the green zones, which are lower level, just by changing the cholesterol that you're consuming. And yet again, when you think about the structure of shea, the very low palmatic saturated fat composition in there really gives you that low level cholesterol. It really has more of the HDL in it. So that's about it on the health benefits. And in summary, it really, Shea's benefit contributes to, it includes compounds that reduces cardiovascular diseases like fatty acids, polyphenolic acids, as well as vitamin E and sterols, and the use of shea nut oil and shea kernel oil fatty acids in food can also help maintain nutritional quality while maintaining and improving functionality. So what else makes shea very unique, and why should the food industry be paying attention? So beyond the fact that from a functionality, we're seeing an increasing use of shea in different products, and that attests to how much of a versatile ingredient it is and how flexible of an ingredient it is, to seeing those health benefits as well that you could derive just looking at the fatty acid composition, looking at the other nutrients that you could get out of it, just makes it a very high ingredient from a nutrition perspective that really should be leveraged a lot, and that health benefits that shea delivers should be harnessed more. The other part is really the social economic and environmental benefits that shea drives. And I think that we're in this environment where consumers are more intentional about what you're buying. They want to make sure that you're buying products that are not contributing to deforestation, or products that are not impacting negatively impacting the livelihoods of those at the upstream level of the supply chain. So there's a very strong awareness from the consumers on what they want to buy and how they want to invest their spending dollars, and making sure that they're doing that responsibly. And that in turn also puts that burden on companies and brands and suppliers to act accordingly. And shea fits that narrative. Not only is it a natural ingredient, it's renewable and it's sustainable. It is part of an agroforestry system that has been practiced for thousands of years in Africa. And that system integrates trees and crops and livestock. And one of the things that we see is that entire landscape, as it's designed, is able to capture and store carbon. We've seen research that has been commissioned by the Global Shea Alliance that talks about how the shea value chain itself can fix about 1.5 million tons of carbon on an annual basis. And yet again, when you think about the production of shea, unlike palm or even cacao and all these other high crops, it doesn't require land clearing. They are trees that have grown naturally and have been farmer managed over time. And these trees are not only just important in the agroforestry system, as you see, but they also help create more resilience for communities. So it is also in the best interest of the farmers to actually keep and protect these trees. Having those trees on their farmlands reduces their exposures to things like soil erosion. Also creates tree cover that protects other crops that they're growing. And when you think about soil health in the context of regenerative agriculture, having shea also increases the nutrients in the soil. So from just an environmental and biodiversity perspective, shea does play a significant role in these communities. And then the other side of it is the social economic impact that I highlighted a bit earlier on in the presentation. It is a huge driver of economic opportunities for women. And we see that the industry in itself can deliver about $150 million in direct income for women. And then there's a multiplier effect on top of that, which increases that income to about 237 million for Shea communities. And the importance of this is that that represents 12% of the annual household income, but more importantly, represents 33% of cash income. And a lot of this income that are generated, we've seen a study that says that about 94% of that income generated is controlled by women. So in a setting where women do not have a lot of access to economic opportunities, do not have access to land, access to finance, Shea is really that cushion, and it's really that the activity that opens up other opportunities, income opportunities for women. We've seen a lot of experiences from the implementation of sustainability programs underground as part of the GSA's effort, how this income generated have been reinvested into additional income opportunities for women. So when you just to summarize that, you see the strong environmental benefit that Shea has. And I think this is important to continue to highlight on the sideline of the New York Climate Week, the importance of investing into Shea parkland restoration and harnessing that benefit, because not only is it creating climate resilience, it's also improving the social economic well-being of pretty much very poor communities in Africa. And this leads me to really just highlight the Global Shea Alliance initiative called Action for Shea Parklands. This is an initiative that we kicked off back in 2020 with the objective of planting and growing 10 million trees over 10 years within the key producing West African countries. And the reason why that's important and the reason why this is a challenge for everyone, both the food industry as well as the cosmetic industry or personal care, is the fact that the tree loss in itself could potentially result into a supply availability within those key producing countries over time if it's not intentionally responded to, and that in turn could impact rural economic development and women economic empowerment, and also expose these communities to a lot of climate challenges. So it is an industry challenge, and I always appreciate the opportunity to speak on this and speak on this particularly to the food industry on the critical role that Shea plays. So creating more visibility in the food space, creating more visibility for Shea on the labels, on the different food labels is important, because once we create that visibility, we're creating more awareness on, the beauty of this ingredient, but yet the challenges that it faces. And just to highlight Action for Shea Parkland a bit more, we're looking to grow 10 million trees through direct seedings, through community nurseries. We're also, implementing natural regeneration practices and also piloting different models like the agroforestry farm model. We want to protect 4 million hectares of parklands over 10 years. And we're doing this through parkland management trainings and best practices, improving local bylaws as well around tree management and tree preservation. On the promote side, we're promoting Shea by, effecting behavioral change and through policy advocacy. And what we ultimately want to do is have about 10 million women leaders that can, at the grassroots level, continue to be the advocate of this restoration effort. So that really is my presentation. Thanks for tuning in and listening to really the beauty and the versatility of this ingredient. From a functionality, from a nutrition perspective, as really from an environmental and social economic perspective as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Wumi, for that presentation. There were lots of really insightful statistics and points made, particularly about the health aspects of Shea. I just wanted to ask you some questions to follow up, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Let's dive in.
Sorry. I was just wondering, so what are some of the changes that you've seen in your time at the GSA? And specifically, what changes have you seen in the lives of the women that collect the Shea?
That's a great question. I think when I started, and I started about 8 years ago, I think industry was just coming to understand the sustainability challenges, and how that really impacts the supply chain in general. People have come to learn about shea. There's increased utilization of shea. We're seeing demand grow. But the other side of it was a bit missing, which is the sustainability aspect of it. Like, what are those possible issues that could impact the growth trajectory of the industry? And when I started, that was very early conversations with a handful of companies really driving that narrative and driving that that dialogue. And I love to use figures as to sort of set the example. When I started, I think we had about 45 um, what we call sustainability partners. So these are people that have committed to implementing sustainability programs within their own respective supply chain. And where we stand now in 2024, that number has well exceeded 200. So now there's a collective response by industry to actually address sustainability. The other part that also complements sustainability is the fact that we're seeing a push for growing demand. So in presentation that I made, you could see the different ways and the innovation that has gone into shea technology, how it's being used in plant-based diet, how it's being used in fats and things like that. You see different countries actually responding to the use of shea. Since I started, China has made shea part of the top 10 ingredients recently that you could actually new raw materials actually in 2017 that you could use in food. We've seen India follow with that kind of regulation. We're seeing the US market opening up a bit more as well, with things like the GRAS notification for Sheolene, another one recently issued by the FDA. All of this comes down to something. The more shea grows, the more the demand grows, and it grows in a sustainable way. There's a direct impact on livelihoods, and there's a direct impact on women. So it's all interrelated. We want to see increased demand. We want to see improved sustainable practices, because that ultimately feeds back to the first level, to women. So all those actions, we're seeing that it's increasing income for women. It's increasing women's ability to invest in additional income generating opportunity, therefore improving their economic standing. We're also seeing how shea is playing a role in addressing food security issues within that context as well. So women having access to disposable funds that they didn't have before, and now able to invest in high nutritious diet for their children, really afford simple things like a chicken or high protein food that they would not necessarily be able to afford in the past. So there's a lot of benefits that we're seeing at the level of at the grassroots level with women's economic empowerment, and how that's driving income for them.
It sounds like really fulfilling work to really be improving people's lives. Very, very happy to have you here. To be honest, it's really important to talk about these things, especially for me as a woman as well.
Absolutely,
um,
absolutely.
and kind of moving away from the grassroots element and kind of going to a global level. But you talked about the Shea Parklands initiative and project. What measures are you taking to ensure that there's a global collaboration on the Shea Parklands project?
Yet again, another fantastic question, Hannah. Thank you. I think when you think about ASP, there's three things that ASP is trying to address. We're trying to grow new trees. We're trying to protect the existing ones, and we're trying to promote the restoration of parklands. And I think the whole global dialogue is at that promote level, where we're driving discussions about shea parklands, and we're making the investment case for it. Shea is unique. And I think, we are confronted by that. Unique in the sense that when you plant a shade tree, it often takes about 15 years before the gestation period, before you start to see the fruit. And that could be a bit discouraging for a lot of farmers and a lot of communities. So making that making the effort to really drive the economic value is important to both preserve the ones that we have right now and continue to restore, intentionally plant and grow new trees to address for the tree loss that we've experienced is important. And that conversation is happening at all levels. It's happening at the local level, it's happening at the regional level, and it's happening at the international level. And it's important that it happens at the international level because that's really where you access the necessary resource to invest back. So you would see GSA at the upcoming New York Climate Week event, really having meetings and talking about Shea. We've attended COP in the past. We're going to be in Azerbaijan again this year. So if anybody watching this is going to be there, please find us and we'll love to talk a bit more about it. But the participation at this high level event is really to drive more awareness as to the global impact of the challenges that the parklands are facing, and how important it is to address it, not just to avoid supply chain disruptions, but also to protect and preserve millions of livelihoods. It is a collective action, and yet again, for people that are listening to this and are watching this, I encourage you to just jump onto www.actionforshea.com and learn more about it and learn how you could support the cause. There's a big responsibility on the food industry to join this movement as the significant and predominant user of shea. 85% of shea goes into food. So having this platform, thank you for inviting us to really drive this conversation is important. And yes, that's what we're trying to do. Have that global conversation, have a global audience listening in to these issues and really finding ways to become very much involved in driving the solutions, the much needed solutions that needs to be put in place.
Thank you so much, Wumi. The work that you guys are doing at the Global Shea Alliance is incredible, and I am so happy that you've joined us again for Confectionery Live.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Hannah. Thank you to you and your team. Fantastic work.